Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond, in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada, we love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free and the home of the brave, on a beautiful August 29th, 2019, Grando Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, it's a hot, sweaty day here, and it's the start of college football season officially tonight. And you know what's great about it, Charlton?
What's that?
I can sit up and watch the game in my birthday suit.
Well, I don't know if I should say happy birthday or happy birthday suit day, Big C. It's all fair and love and war. No matter how you get down, it's always great when football is around. There's still a lot of stuff going on in baseball, and seeing some teams that were running away with their lead, maybe losing a little bit of focus, especially in the Dodgers. And it's just so much happening. Even talk of NBA players having some issues, and you know, it's all part of life. And I know, but WNBA doesn't really get the attention because it just doesn't have the attention and the ability to compete with college football, NFL football, and then NBA as well as Major League Baseball. But we don't want to bring it all to you. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. I was telling you how so much happens in California, and of course down south where you guys are. I know you're really happy about the start of the college football season, but I think they call it last week was 0 week. Now, I can't find 0 anywhere on the calendar unless it's associated with other numbers, Big C, it does.
Well, you know, it was a 0 week because you didn't have a full slate of games. So,
yeah.
You know, you had a couple games that kicked off the season. I mean, a very exciting game way out there on the left coast. It would be on the west coast,
yep.
Out on the left coast out there in Hawaii with the University of Arizona
yep.
and the University of Hawaii, which was the most exciting game of last week, Charlton. Everybody had their eyes on Florida down in Orlando with Florida and Miami.
Yeah.
But the big game of the night was out on the left coast.
Yeah, it's amazing how that game went down, too, with Hawaii pulling out a win with a stop right around the 1-yard line. And then the talk that I hear from people about the Florida and Miami game, I thought it was an amazing game. But you know how our society is. People want you to play as well in week 0 as you play in week 14, Big C. And I don't think that's possible. But when you look at the athleticism on those teams and the ability for both Florida and Miami to not run the table, but I don't see any of them losing more than maybe 2 games for Florida. Maybe Miami might drop 3 because they have Clemson coming up, and they gotta find a way to play strong against whoever else they play on that schedule. But I was excited about college football, and even the way Hawaii and Arizona in it, I don't think that's a bad thing. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that Miami and Florida game, Charlton, that game was as sloppy as a baby eating cake. I mean, there was more fumbles and penalties in the game for an opening game. And I granted, it was opening game of season, and you have all those jitters.
Yeah.
But you contrast that to the hype that they gave that game versus the game out in Hawaii with the University of Hawaii and, you know, University of Arizona.
Yeah.
I mean, a very electrifying game. 2 quarterbacks who came out and played very prolific football. Charlton put up huge numbers. Each one of them passed for over 350 yards in the game.
Yeah.
Khalil Tate, the quarterback for Arizona, amassed 478 yards in total offense. So when you think about that, what those games did, Charlton, with some veteran quarterbacks that can go out and produce, your college football is all about the hype. It's about whatever the networks want to build up as being the best game and the best players on television. Most often, just like we talked about with HBC schools, you don't get a chance to see the best players in college football, which really costs them when it comes to draft stock, when it comes to the NFL. But, you know, you live with the hype. Everybody will tell you this guy is greater than that guy. One thing they don't do on college football every week is put up the stats. Put up the stats of players, Charlton, to show the performance from week to week. They'll give you the guy on the hype. You can be surrounded by a great team. Doesn't mean you're a great player. Look at those quarterbacks that played at University of Florida, University of Miami. You know, in the 90s. They were surrounded by a lot of guys that played in the NFL for a long time.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's all about getting the push to it. And even with Hawaii having their opener, Big C, they didn't have a sellout crowd. You would think the island would just at least rally around game one, especially Hawaii's going to have a good team this year. But with Florida and also University of Miami, they sold out down in Orlando. So they were both out of town, and the whole state showed up. We couldn't even get the whole island to show up in Hawaii to see their only team that plays D1 football, Big C. But it's all fair and love and war. I do want to say, I'm so happy with artificial intelligence. You can follow Big C Sports, brought to you by Google and Alexa. Just say Google, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you'll see our platform pop up on your tablet or page. Or the one I like is Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the growth we're having with iHeartRadio and also other platforms, Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. I do want to say, because we do honor our military, Big C, and it's not just a one-time a year thing or one-time a month thing. We always want to honor our military veterans, and we know there are times when people serve our country, they have issues, and sometimes those issues don't show up right away. It shows up when they come back home. But there's still help. There's a national suicide hotline, and it's not just for veterans, but I really want to make sure that there's no it, Big C. They dial 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or they can text 838-255. That's 838-255. And I love how you say, from your perspective, why that number is so important to you, because you're the reason that we say that number every single show that we have, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, it's even more prescient now, Charlton, that people think about that. You know, you're going to have a lot of people going through issues still every day. But now that college football and professional football is ready to kick off its full slate, people that may be needing some attention from others won't be getting it because people will be distracted because of the sports activities that's going on all over the country. And they'll forget to talk to people. They'll forget to check up on people. So don't, just because a great sporting event is on, forget about those people that are in need. We have so many veterans, and we have just people in mainstream society that need someone to talk to pay attention to them, to check up on them every day. But this national suicide hotline number that's out there for people to call and for people to text, it's there also. But don't forget the human touch of reaching out for somebody.
Reach out and touch somebody's hand, and we've heard that so many times. And again, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255, or text 838-255, 838-255, and you can always get some help. I know with the start of college football, being out here in the Bay Area, and you know how I talked to you about some of the programs out here. We've lost football in California. At the same time, you mentioned about schools in the South that are adding on to reach the 100,000 seat, plateau. I may not get them all, but just off the top of my head, we've lost in the last 20 to 25 years, Chico State, we've lost Humboldt State, we've lost Sonoma State, the great Larry Allen for the Cowboys played there. We've lost Cal State Hayward, San Francisco State, UOP. We've lost programs that are down south. We actually, St. Mary's of Moraga, which is in the heart of the East Bay and the Bay Area, Big C. And then going down south, Cal State Fullerton, lost Cal State Long Beach. So there are a number of programs that have lost football. And I just want to, and we're in the largest state in the United States of America in California, the most populated state. But southern states with smaller, I guess you could say smaller, numbers as far as people, population, how do they add on when bigger states can't keep those stadiums full and those programs in action? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about California is a state of diversion, of different opportunities going on.
Yeah.
When you think about the southern states and the Midwest and the northeastern states, Charlton, football has always been a lifeline. It is what brought communities together. When you think about the high school games that are playing in them, people talk about high school football in Texas. You go to Ohio, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Those high schools draw 20,000 people in those stadiums, Charlton. You come to California, sports is almost a secondary thought in California. It's about setting things up. When you look at college football and you talk about all those universities that have lost their programs, that's because lack of attendance.
Yeah.
They're not doing things like they do in the southern states, Charlton, to promote football year-round. It's just a seasonal thing. In the southern and the northeastern states, Charlton, it is a year-round entity. Even during basketball season, football is still talked about. When you have spring games in those areas, I mean, you get attendance of 80,000 people at a spring game.
Yeah.
On the West Coast, you might get 8,000, regardless of the size of the university. They just don't market. We talked about last night. When you watch an SEC game, you hear that chant in the stadium, SEC,
yeah.
SEC. You hear it in the ACC. You will never hear that in a Pac-12 game, Charlton. They will never have that chant Pac-12. You will never hear it in a Big Ten game, Charlton. They don't have the chant Big Ten, nor even in the Big 12. So when you talk about the loss of athletic, programs on the West Coast,
yeah.
you can't even find a stadium in California that's full for any game.
Yeah.
The last time I saw a stadium full for a game in California, Charlton, that was a Monday Night Football game between the Rams and the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Other than that, you don't get sellouts. And when you look at college football, USC at the Coliseum, they've reduced down the capacity of the Coliseum. This was a stadium that held 96,000 fans.
Now it's like
the Rose Bowl,
78,000.
at best, UCLA will get 50,000 people in the Rose Bowl. It will seat 106,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
So the West Coast doesn't do enough to market its football. The Pac-12 is well behind the curve. You have the commissioner of the Pac-12 right now talking about experimenting with 9 a.m. games.
Yeah,
if you
crazy.
can't get people to the ballpark at 1 p.m. in the afternoon and 7:30 at night, you're not going to get anybody to the ballpark at 9 a.m. on the West Coast.
Well, that might be the problem. Again, I told you trying to get a media pass. I had a colonoscopy that was easier to get done than getting a media pass for a Pac-12 game. And I've been going to the stadiums for over 20 years. But oftentimes there's a pushback. We don't want a lot of people coming to our games. Like, who are you anyway? And it's just crazy how that happens. But I know also I will credit some of the Pac-12 schools because when you have the overall championships when it comes to schools, oftentimes you get a lot of teams from the Pac-12. And I also want to bring up, because you and I always talk about being advocates for education and how it's one thing when you're going through college and you're being pushed through like cattle. And if you get hurt, they kick you to the side. I've seen that happen to a lot of players. But I would just want to commend all the players around the country that study, because it's not fair that everybody's labeled as some jock that's just there to play football or basketball or baseball. 1,452 college football players who will play this season after already earning a diploma, according to figures compiled by the National Football Foundation and College Hall of Fame. The numbers include 964 players from 126 schools in the Bowl subdivision. Big C, I think that's something you'll probably only hear about that on Big C Sports, but it's something that should be mentioned all the time when we kick off. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's become very notable in the past couple of years in college football, Charlton. They're talking about kids who graduate on broadcast. You hear that regularly. You hear about these grad transfers where you're allowed to leave a program after graduating and go to any school that you choose and not have to sit out a year. There's a half a dozen quarterbacks that are going to be starting this season in college football that graduated from their previous university. They transferred without having to sit out and able to walk into an existing university and start. The most notable one will be Jalen Hurts, who left Alabama and went to Oklahoma. He graduated before he left Alabama with a national championship ring on his finger, and now he's going to be the starter at Alabama.
Yeah.
This has always been out there, and this is one of the things I've always talked about being an advocate of, is that the broadcast companies need to mention more about GPAs and how many kids are on track to graduate on time or have graduated. That's an easy footnote to put into a broadcast versus always talking about their athleticism.
Yeah.
I mean, that's run its course. You know what a guy is athleticism-wise. I would like for them to concentrate and speak more about the intelligence of the athletes. There's so many great intelligent athletes out there. Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and that's why I'm proud that Big C Sports has done that. And so even tonight, now I believe Marvin Lewis is on the staff with Tony Dungy, not Tony Dungy, but down at Arizona State. And
Herm
Edwards. And I know that to me is kind of under the radar because we hear a lot about, Coach Kelly going back from Philadelphia and then TV and now at UCLA. He built Oregon into a good program. But also, when you think about Lewis, he took Cincinnati, I think, to the playoffs almost every year except for one, and I could be wrong. And that move was kind of under the radar, Big C. Why? Kelly only went to the playoffs, I think, 1 year with the Eagles. He had nowhere near the track record. But I just want to get your thoughts. I think Marvin Lewis and Herm Edwards, Arizona State is going to be on the rise with that program. I know they shrunk down their stadium, but when you can get top talent, why did he go under the radar, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, he went into an assistant coach's position, Charlton. He didn't get a head coaching job. Well, when you look around college football, it is littered with former head coaches all over the place. You have NFL and college coaches that have gone on and taken assistant coaches' jobs. You got to realize wherever you are, there's only so many head coaching positions on all levels.
Yeah.
And to be able to go to a staff like Herm Edwards, he has 5 former NFL players on his staff. Matter of fact, Kevin Mawai, who's his offensive line coach, was just inducted to the NFL Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
So he has a wealth of knowledge on his coaching staff down there, Charlton. It's just a matter, can you get the best out of the players that you have, on the roster?
Yeah, and so that's a good job by the great Herm Edwards, because we play to win the game, and I think Arizona State, they'll find out tonight if it's going to work out. They're playing. Now, here's Arizona State. I remember they had a coach back in the day, and his name may slip me, but I think it was Cush, and they were always in contention for national championships. And I think they played in the Western Athletic Conference back then. I think one year they'd even tied Florida State for the number 1 choice in the country. So Arizona State's at home tonight, and they're a 25-point favorite over Kent State. And I would think that Arizona State, they lost last year in the Las Vegas Bowl to Fresno State by double digits. But this is still a program that turns out a lot of good athletes from down in the desert. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they've always had great athletes. It used to be a university that was known if you needed a defensive back, running back, or a wide receiver, you would go to Arizona State when Frank Cush was the coach down there.
Yeah.
He was known as, for the great athletes that he produced out of that university, many NFL stars.
Yeah.
But, now that this program has changed and has gone into the Pac-12, Charlton, the pickings are slimmer out there on the West Coast.
Yeah.
When you look at all of those teams out there. Like I said, until USC becomes relevant out on the West Coast, the Pac-12 is just a conference out there basically in limbo.
Yeah.
You can talk about Oregon, but Oregon is not going to move the needle on the national scale. They're going to have some hiccups along the way. They're going to be in a dogfight even in their opening game.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens down there with Auburn. But another program on the West Coast that, if they can get back to winning, because their winning used to be synonymous with USC, is USC, UCLA, and everybody knows that they used to play their home games at the LA Coliseum, and then for some reason UCLA wanted their own stadium. They moved out to the Rose Bowl. That's a good hour drive from Westwood, Big C, and that's in good traffic. So it's at least an hour and a half drive depending on the traffic. Now, they're on the road tonight. They're a 4-point underdog to Cincinnati that came to the Rose Bowl and beat them last year with Chip Kelly as the head coach. The over-under in that game is 57 points. If there's going to be a surprise team in the Pac-12, he has the same type of athletes at UCLA that he had up at Oregon, because a lot of his players came from Los Angeles, Big C. Give me your thoughts on him building that program back.
Well, I think that program, Charlton, is still a couple of years away. UCLA still doesn't have a wealth of talent. If you think about the best player on UCLA's offense last year, it was a guy that wasn't even recruited by the Pac-12.
Yeah.
Think about that. Their best player was a running back that they had to gain over 1,200 yards, and he was a transfer from UC Davis.
Yeah.
So he wasn't even coming out of high school. Anyone thought of him as a Pac-12 talent. So he comes in, and he's the best player on that roster. Chip Kelly has to have at least 3 years of recruiting, as they say, to build his own program, because the players that were already in place, they don't always fit the scheme that you're trying to run.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Skip Kelly has the same moxie that he had when he was at Oregon.
When he
had at Oregon, he had a pipeline. He had a
Yeah.
pipeline of great talent from all over the country wanting to come there. And the major attraction about Oregon was their uniform.
Uniform colors,
Being
yeah.
sponsored by Nike. Every kid wanted to have an opportunity to have Nike everything that he had.
Yeah.
And so getting kids to come to Oregon just based on the apparel was the easiest thing. I think they have 93 different uniform matchups.
Yeah, and that's
so that was always exciting to players.
Yeah, and that's just the home games, Big C. They got more on the road, Big C. Another program Tulane doesn't really move the needle down there in New Orleans, but they're a 2-point favorite against Florida International. And I know that's not a big name, but Tulane, there are times that they can have a pretty decent season. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Florida International, I mean, this is a team that you think about the athletes in that state. Well, you talked about California and the programs that goes down. Look at the number of programs that have grown down in Florida, the number of athletes that are down there. When you think about, they have a dozen universities, Charlton, that play very competitive football down in Florida. I mean, everybody talks about the three big boys down there, Florida, Miami, and Florida State.
Yeah.
But there's a wealth of talent down there in Florida and nationally ranked teams that have not been in those Power 5 conferences.
Let me get your thought on a team that I always thought was better aligned with being in the Big 12 than in the Pac-12, and that would be Utah. And they have a game against BYU, their state rival, and Utah's a 7-point favorite. The over-under is 48. BYU is known as a team that could pass the ball, but they're not the same as they were under the great Lavelle Edwards. But Utah, it's a team that people, they were in the Pac-12 championship last year. You wouldn't think about it because it's such a small state, Big C. But if they get off to a strong start, that's what the Pac-12 wants. Last year's Pac-12 championship game over in San Francisco, Santa Clara, it drew less than 25,000 for the Pac-12 championship. They don't want to see Utah in the Pac-12 championship game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if it would make a difference regardless of who you have in the Pac-12 championship game. You have to really look hard to see the last time a Pac-12 championship game drew more than 60,000 fans.
Yeah.
And that's unheard of when you talk about Northeast and Southeast football, Charlton, when you're going to have 100,000 or whatever stadium capacity you have. You know, the thing about West Coast football, Charlton, what is the draw appeal? What do they do to bring the fans to the stadium? You talk about some of the teams that don't even have on-campus stadiums, USC, UCLA. Student body has a hard time. I don't know if you've driven down the traffic in Los Angeles, but trying to get to a game, for the student body, and you don't have mass transit. I don't believe they have a subway system out there that will get the kids to the game.
No, that's pretty much
transportation is always a problem. But when you look at games in the Midwest, the Southeast, the Southwest, Charlton, the Northeast, they have on-campus stadiums. So student body can walk from the dorm right into the game. They don't have to get on city or public transportation trying to get there. So the Pac-12 needs to do things to entice the student body to come to the games more, to make it more interactive for them. Yeah,
it's amazing. They got to let more media come in, too. I want to get a couple more college games and go down south and get your flavor. When we look at some of the programs that are expected to really have a good season, you look at Texas A&M. I know they gave Jimbo $75 million. They're a 32-point favorite against Texas State. Now, Texas State and Texas A&M, that's pretty much a scrimmage game for A&M. But sometimes when you play those in-state rivals, it could be Appalachian State, Michigan. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, one of the things about in-state rivals, Charlton, is that you get a lot of kids who have played against each other in high school, that have grown up with each other. Emotions takes a big toll on those games, but I think just along with the athleticism that you're going to get down at Texas A&M, you have a high-quality program with a lot of quality athletes, Charlton. I think they'll just outman them in this game.
Well, another game that a lot of people have attention given to and no respect given to Georgia Tech. They're a 37-point underdog, actually 33, depending on what poll you look at, and the over-under is 60 to Clemson. And I know Georgia Tech is downtown Atlanta. Georgia has a lot of good athletes. And this Clemson team, I still remember how they struggled to beat Syracuse. In fact, I thought there was some shenanigans that went on to help them beat Syracuse. And I think that Georgia Tech is just as talented as Syracuse. Plus, Georgia Tech is a run, kind of a wishbone option type team. If you could control the clock and keep the big power team off the field in Clemson, Clemson's a timing offense. I won't say that Georgia Tech can beat them. But do you agree with 33-point spread? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Georgia Tech, they've changed their entire scheme. They actually have a new coach this year named Sean Collins. And so they're going to scrap basically the wishbone offense that they ran under Paul Johnson for a decade. And now they have to try to find athletes that can play in this Sean Collins scheme. So you're taking a roster full of guys who are wishbone-type players and putting them into a passing scheme.
Yeah.
It's going to take some time to adjust to what Sean Collins is doing there at Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if they can even hang with Clemson. This is the team that, if they're clicking on all cylinders offensively, Charlton, they can hang 50 points on Georgia Tech. I don't see Georgia Tech having the athletes right now to run Sean Collins' system to be able to compete with Dabo Swinney and Clemson.
You look at this kid in Lawrence. He threw for 3,280 yards last year and 30 touchdowns as a freshman. The one thing that helped him last year is there were no defensive back coaches or coordinators that had a read on him to understand how they could cut him off at the pass, Big C. And now everybody's had the chance to study tape. And it's hard to beat people when they've seen you for a whole year. Do you think he surpasses what he did last year, or will they count on more of the running game and pound people with it? They have a good offensive line down at Clemson. Your thoughts?
Well, they're going to be starting 4 seniors with Clemson on the offensive line, so the protection is there for Lawrence. Travis Etienne, is a great All-American running back they have. But one of the things that Clemson is missing this year, you think about their defense. They had 4 players drafted in the top 40 last year in the NFL draft. 3 went in the first round, 1 went with the 40th pick.
Yeah.
So you lost a lot of that veteran leadership on defense that brought you to the level of play that you're at. Offense, they should be fine. I mean, this is an offense that exploded in the national championship game and also against Notre Dame in the semifinal game.
Yeah.
So I see Lawrence playing equally as well as what he did last year. Now, he didn't get the starting job until the 4th game of the season.
That's right.
So, it took him a while to learn the system, but once he did, he was on fire.
Yeah. Well, I know we'll showcase Big C's college football tomorrow, Big C's high school football tomorrow, and then we'll get into some NFL. But the quarterback on the West Coast, and I know you eat a lot of duck, Big C, on that barbecue grill. I don't know does duck taste better in the oven baked, or do you grill that also, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, no, you got to be able to cook duck properly. You got to grill it. You got to sear it, in a cast iron skillet.
Yeah.
It's great. Get that crispy skin on it, just score just a little bit, and leave it medium rare.
Well, the Pac-12, whenever they play down in Texas, they do better when they bring their own food. Justin Herbert threw for 3,100 yards last year for the Oregon Ducks. Actually, 31-51 and 29 touchdowns last year for Oregon. Oregon's offensive line might be the best in the Pac-12 this year. And there's many people that think they're just a better team than Auburn. But down south, you get athletes that maybe fly under the radar because they're not Alabama or Georgia. If you have a quarterback that you will have a hard time scheming against as a former defensive guy, does Herbert get your attention as much as Lawrence? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the thing that I look about with Herbert is he's been inconsistent. I don't even think he's the best quarterback on the West Coast.
Really?
You got to look at Utah, where you have Love, who's an outstanding quarterback, but because he's at Utah State, people don't give him the notoriety that Herbert has gotten. Herbert has been a media quarterback. You can look at Stanford. Stanford had a true freshman quarterback last year that outplayed Herbert. Actually, on the season, had better statistics. Herbert is a guy who has to prove himself that he can compete for an entire season. I saw him in a couple games where he became mentally lackadaisical and cost Oregon some games. So he has to show me the complete form of maturity for him to get all the hype that he's got.
Well, I'm looking forward to college football. There's a lot of good storylines to be told, and we want to tell it to you all the time. What we're going to do is come up on what we call the Big C timeout. We're going to come back and talk about a few more things that are so important that we'd be negligent if we didn't talk about it. We'll do that in just a moment, and we hope that you'll come back and enjoy it with us. All right, we are back on the Big C Sports Show after the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And I want to just appreciate what's going on with our sports show, Big C Sports, brought to you by Google and Alexa. You can say, Google, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll see the page pop up on the platform. You can say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing, and I really appreciate being on this platform that we have. You can also find Big C Sports on the #1 podcast network in the universe on iHeartRadio Podcast. And I really just appreciate the growth and everything that's going on. But I'd be remiss if I didn't say what I'm going to talk about. And I know sometimes people say, well, we don't want to hear it right now. I still remember one time I was at the Oakland Coliseum. This is about 20 years ago. And there was an all-pro football player, and I was with the CBS Sports crew at the time, and he was yelling at her so loud, and she was just sitting there shaking, and nobody said anything, not even me, Big C, and I feel ashamed that I did not say anything. But what can you do at that time? But everybody makes a pass for bad behavior, especially when you can help somebody win a game. But as a father, I would hope that if my daughter was ever in trouble, that some guy would not do what I did 20 years ago and say, well, I don't want to get involved. That's why I'm so adamant about saying call 911, because I could have done something, and I chose not to, Big C, because I didn't want to lose my spot with CBS Sports. So we have this issue with DeMarcus Cousins and all the stuff that people heard on an audio tape. We've seen players with the Kansas City Chiefs get in trouble. We saw Larry Bayer, the owner of the San Francisco Giants, do some things that were on audio tape. But everybody has an excuse for this bad behavior. But if it's your daughter, like Sam Jackson said, in A Time to Kill, then we want somebody to stand up for us. So I don't know what happened yet with DeMarcus Cousins, but I know there's an arrest warrant out for him down in Alabama, something to do with his ex-girlfriend and a child. But no one should defend what he said on tape, because if you do, imagine the guy that your own daughter's dating saying the same thing to her. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I've seen so many of these incidents where athletes are put in the spotlight when it comes to this. This is a societal problem. This is not an athletic problem. It's a societal problem. But you also got to look at the young woman when they're involved in these situations. Why do they gravitate to these athletes? Is it about love or is it about money? I mean, even in society, is it about love or is it about money? And when you're sitting there audio or videotaping somebody, what are you actually trying to accomplish? Are you enticing this person to say these things so that you can have some potential leverage down the road? These things just don't happen, out of the blue.
Right.
These things are orchestrated. Whenever we get a recording of somebody going through an incident, unless it's a hotel video or something, a public light, Charlton, that there's more emphasis put on an athlete when they're in a domestic situation. You think about the killings that took place in New Mexico just a couple of weeks ago, in Dayton, Ohio, just a couple of weeks ago. Is anybody in the media talking about that anymore? We're talking about people who lost their lives in a nightclub out trying to have fun.
Yeah.
We're talking about people who lost their lives in a Walmart out trying to buy clothes for their kids to go back to school.
Yeah.
And yet more emphasis is put on DeMarcus Cousins than those people who have lost their lives in America.
Yeah, well, I look at it two ways. And people can say, well, no one says anything when mainstream beats up his wife or girlfriend, and we know assault happens every 20 seconds in this country. And people may say, well, why talk about the athletes when they do it? They should be no more different than anybody else, because they are in the public eye. And because I was one of those knuckleheads that said, well, I don't want to be involved. Maybe she did something wrong. Maybe she said something wrong to him. But I know now that I wasn't a father then, if I was a father, maybe I would have a different mentality. Because I challenge any man to have whatever DeMarcus Cousins said to that woman, to stand in front of a father and say those same things to that man's daughter.
But think about this, Charlton.
Yeah.
Shouldn't that father raise his daughter to not want to be in that type of situation, to know when the line is there, that's not a healthy situation to be in? A lot of these girls don't have fathers at home, so they're seeking whatever they can to get that solidity in life that they're looking for, whether it's financial or fake love, Charlton.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when you got a father around, a father has nurtured you against dealing with situations like that, because I know I've raised my daughter to show her what to expect and not to expect from a man. Don't expect anything less than what I've provided for you in your life.
Yeah.
Don't let a guy sit up and tell you you're pretty, you're gorgeous, and all that. She's heard that every day of her life.
Yeah.
But when she's sitting there with low self-esteem, Charlton, and she's trying to get ahead of the curve without working, is that going out producing a baby, saying, hey, I got my pension plan. This is my 401k, my baby. This is what they do with professional athletes.
Yeah.
This is what women do. So they go to all extremes. We dealt with the situation with Kareem Hunt. Him and his ex-girlfriend been going through this, well, his current girlfriend, they've been going through this since they were at Oklahoma State.
And still together.
This is a love-hate relationship. This is unhealthy.
Yeah.
But what makes women stay in these unhealthy relationships? It doesn't make any difference whether it's mainstream. It doesn't make any difference whether it's athletics. Everybody knows somebody in their family or in their associations that have been involved in these unhealthy relationships. And I guarantee you the majority of them didn't have a father or a dad in the home.
That's a very good point. And I love that point of view because I've seen it on both sides. But I also want to bring this up too because as men, you're not going to find people that speak like Big C Sports. They're just not. They're too passive. I hear people saying, well, let's wait till more comes out. No, you talk about it now because every 20 seconds, some guy's not waiting for some more information to come out before he goes upside somebody's head. And we can save people. I know we can because I told you just the other day, I saw a Caucasian man abusing this woman. I didn't see him smack her, but he was all in her face and she was intimidated walking through a downtown major city. And I called 911. But for 10 seconds, I even paused because I thought like 20 years ago, well, I don't want to get involved. Maybe somebody else will get. And something said, wait a minute, Charlton, just call 911. And when I did that, I told them she was white, and she was. Within 3 minutes, law enforcement showed up. So hopefully that stopped something. But I want to say something to you also, because I also have a boy. And I tell him you can be accused of something that you did not do. And if you are a black male, at some point in your life, you will get accused of doing something that you did not do. We know that, even from the Kerner Commission. So what message do we tell to young boys, like I tell my son, and I'm also open for advice, how do we keep ourselves out of that situation to not be such a knucklehead like DeMarcus Cousins? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you can say that DeMarcus Cousins is a knucklehead. Is Robert Kraft a knucklehead? He was arrested for dealing with a woman.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing.
So does that make him a knucklehead? I mean, it's not about being a knucklehead. It's about putting yourself in those situations. I mean, everybody chooses whichever path they want to take in life. It doesn't make any difference whether you're a billionaire, a millionaire,
That's
or broke. True.
That's true.
You know, law enforcement can come after you regardless. So to say that, you know, DeMarcus Cousins is a knucklehead, then Robert Kraft has to be a knucklehead. It's just going to be judged by society differently. The media will beat up on DeMarcus Cousins because he's an African-American athlete. The media has forgotten about Robert Kraft being arrested.
Yeah, I agree. That's 100% true. And I still say, and that's why, especially as African-American fathers, we got to tell our kids that you can't put yourself in that situation. And one more thing I'll say, and people might say, oh, just get off my lawn, mind your own business. But for a lot of young people, and I'm thinking about what you said, when that athlete, an all-pro football player, maybe she took that abuse because she was saying, well, maybe I need this meal ticket. I don't know. But there are times when some women will act like the damsel in distress, and they'll let themselves be taken advantage of by men because they got a big wallet or because they got a big gold chain.
Look at Josh Brown, the former kicker for the New York Giants.
Yeah.
Had the police called by his former
20
wife
times.
21 times.
Yeah.
21 times this woman called the police on him. Now, if you've been abused 2 times, you know that's too many.
Exactly.
Once you got to 5, you know it wasn't going to stop. When you got to 12, at what point did you realize that wasn't the lifestyle that you had grown accustomed to?
Yeah.
When you got to 20, you stayed with him, Charlton, because he was the meal ticket. He was the 401k. I don't care how many kids you got with the guy. He still got to pay child support.
Yeah.
But you don't want to give up that lifestyle. These women do not want to give up these lifestyles. That's what they're most afraid of. They've gotten comfortable. They don't have to work. They got the jewelry. They got the travel. They got the nice cars. They got the nice clothes. It's hard to get that type of lifestyle when you don't have a college degree,
Yep.
when you don't have a job, and the guy that you're dealing with has a 7 to 8 figure salary. It makes it real easy to stay in that situation regardless of the abuse or non-abuse that you're taking.
Yeah.
But most of them get to a point where whatever they did to get those guys, Charlton, that guy is still doing.
Yeah.
He's still on the road every week. He's still traveling. He still has his group of groupies that still come around just like you did when you got him.
Yeah.
And you think that he's going to stop because all of a sudden you got a child? No. So you're getting angry, and you entice the guy. You push all the buttons on him to get him to the point of frustration.
Yeah.
It's a two-sworded edge, sword when it comes to this, Charlton.
Yeah.
That knife cuts both ways. It just so happens normally that the athlete is the more physical specimen of the two, and the woman is going to, anytime she claims that he did something, but think about it, she recorded him saying something.
Yeah.
You think she was not trying to entice that situation for financial gain, Charlton?
Maybe so. Maybe so. That's why boys need to understand no means no. And it may seem simplistic unless you get the DA calling you, and he has to deal with that now. And I know he's probably heard that before. So I just want to say to a lot of young people, You may not be rich, you may not be famous, but there's a behavior, and I was having a conversation with a woman just the other day, because the same situation with, I think, Larry Baer with his wife and owner of the San Francisco Giants, and then this thing with Luke Walton, the head coach for the Sacramento Kings. Now, I know he's a Caucasian guy, and people want to let him off the hook. I don't know if he's innocent or not, but as I'm saying to young women, and I had this conversation, and the woman said I was a knucklehead for having this opinion. And I may have said something very stupid, and that won't be the first time. But I said, now, why was she in the man's hotel room? We've heard that before. She has a right. And the woman said, well, she could go any room she want to go. I said, yeah, but if you're a business person, why not have him meet you in the lobby? Because now you're having to deal with, in his room, people saying what happened. Kobe Bryant, the same thing happened to him. In his room. It didn't happen in the lobby. There's a lot of guys that have been in trouble that have been on TV and they're off now because someone came into their room. Mike Tyson with the prison because someone came into his room, Big C. He could have met in the lobby. Does that make any sense, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, you could go to a wealth of people. Matt Lauer, look at Harvey Weinstein, Charlton. Everybody gets set up in a situation.
Yeah.
People know what they're doing. They're very cognizant of these situations, whether they're dealing with a high-profile individual or an athlete, Charlton. This has always occurred. This is nothing new. The thing about it now, we have all this rapid media.
Yeah.
Before, it had to come on the late-night news and sports. It came in the next day's newspaper. Now you get it instantly through Instagram, through a tweet,
yeah,
or even a breaking news story. We have this breaking news all the time. It is not news to find out about somebody dealing with domestic violence. Sports shows are so void of input and information about games is that they seek to become tabloid television also. At some point, it's got to be about just athleticism, not about somebody's personal life, because as many times as they talk about athletes being in trouble,
yeah,
they don't talk about the good things that athletes go out and do on a daily basis, but they seek out the one negative story on an athlete, and all of a sudden they're trying to tarnish somebody's career or history.
Yeah. Well, it's always fair and love and war. Everybody has an opinion. I think as a person that has access to the airwaves, and I have a boy and a girl that can listen to me, because I listened when I was growing up, and it kept me out of situations because I did listen. I didn't wait until I was handcuffed and say, you know what, maybe I should have listened. I want that message to be out there for kids that don't have access to that. I also want to bring up, tonight in the world of baseball, when you think about the Minnesota Twins, they broke a major league record for the most home runs on the road, getting back-to-back homers in the third inning. You know, we talked about performance-enhancing drugs, Big C, and things you can buy at a gas station. Well, Thursday, the total 140 on the season thus far, and they surpassed the record of 138 home runs set in the season by the 2001 San Francisco Giants, and we still got over 30 games to go, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you know, they've been on a rapid tear all season long, Charlton, and most likely they're going to set the major league records for home runs in the season. But those Twins up there in Minneapolis have just played outstanding baseball in the Central Division of the AL, and they seem to be a lock for the playoffs.
Yes, it's good baseball happening this time of year. And you think about last night, the Washington Nationals pitcher, Max Scherzer, he struck out 8, and he reached the 200 strikeout mark for the 8th consecutive season, which is now a Major League Baseball record. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Max Scherzer, you know, has been one consistent for the Washington Nationals, Charlton, for the past couple of years. And he broke that record last night, Charlton, getting 8 strikeouts in 8 innings. And he surpassed the great Tom Seaver, Hall of Fame pitcher from the New York Mets, Charlton, who grew up out there in California where you are in Clovis, California. But Tom Seaver held that record, and now Matt Scherzer sits on top of that mountain all alone.
It's amazing how records, they're being broken. There are going to be a number of players in the Major League Baseball that hit over 40 home runs this year. That's going to be a record. And they're also projecting a number of players that will hit over 30 home runs. That will also be a record for Major League Baseball. But still no talk about someone taking illegal, you know, the steroid era and the cream and all that. But we know something's happening, and you also mentioned Major League Baseball. They control and how tight the ball is round, Big C. So who knows what a good boy says he wants to see more balls hit out of the park, what they're doing behind the scenes. I want to just cover tonight's schedule for the sake of Major League Baseball. And it's really important now because especially if you're a team like the Oakland A's or you're a team like the San Francisco Giants out here on the West Coast, even Milwaukee, you're either going to make it or not make it based on what you do in the month of September, which is just coming up over the weekend. And tonight's schedule, Chicago is at the New York Mets. And they're a team that they have a chance. You have John Lester and Jacob deGrom on the mound. You have Cincinnati at Miami. Seattle's at Texas. Pittsburgh's at Colorado. And this team, the LA Dodgers, they're at Arizona. And you have Henry Rue versus Merrill Kelly. And we're going to find out if Rue is the real deal, because the Dodgers have been struggling a little bit. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, the heat of the summer has caught up with the Dodgers, and the Yankees have caught up with them for the best record in baseball. So, you know, they're not going to lose the Western Division.
No.
With that 20-game lead out there in the National League West, Charlton, they're a shoe-in right now for the playoffs.
Yep.
It's just a matter of who their opponent is going to be in that first round when they get them, and will they be able to pick up those bats once again and get back on that hitting streak.
San Diego at San Francisco, and I know there's a lot of things planned for Bruce Bochy coming up, because the skipper's going to have his last year over in San Francisco. And I really look forward to if the Giants can get in. I doubt if they'll get in, but I think the fans are treating it as if this month coming up in September is really kind of like the playoffs for the Giants. Also, Cleveland in the matchup game at Detroit. Oakland A's at Kansas City. Minnesota Twins. Chicago White Sox and Tampa Bay down at Houston. And Houston's looking good. And I think what happened with Verlander just the other day, Big C, that might be some glue that stirs that pot and brings that team closer together when your ace pitcher can get tossed out because he was mouthing out and standing up for what he believed in. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, pitchers often get into it with the umpires, Charlton, because they're going to challenge on a strike zone, thinking that the ball was where it may not have been. You know, one of the things about baseball is that they, regardless of that little box that they show up on television, they still use that live umpire. And the call comes up to him, not what we speculate about on screen.
Yeah, that's true, too. However, if you are, at some point in time, what I appreciate, and I think it's just common sense, every manager, even if your player is wrong, they come out and try to advocate for their star athlete as opposed to not, and they never chastise that star athlete in front of anybody's eyes. But there's something about keeping your cool and making sure everyone's on the same page. But I really appreciate while athletes put it out there, it's not like it's staged, it's not like it's canned. There's real emotions behind it. And now, when football players do it, or especially basketball players do it, it's less tolerated. Baseball, in your opinion, is it more lenient when someone's chewing out the officiating? Big C, your thoughts?
It's the history of the game. When you look at all sports has a level of what you can do in it. It's always been the unwritten rule.
Yeah.
Players have always been able to challenge umps. Managers have always been able to come out and challenge umps. The thing about baseball that differs from football and basketball is that you're allowed out on the playing surface.
Yeah.
In the NBA, you're not allowed on the playing surface unless it's a timeout, just like in the NFL. Once you cross that barrier, now you're going to get illegal activity and you're going to get a penalty for it.
Yeah, that's always the case. I want to get your thoughts, too, as we get into September. I know the Dodgers said that they would extend the foul ball netting all the way from foul pole to foul pole, and I don't see that happening at every stadium yet. I think it would be a great gesture by Major League Baseball to say, if you are at least a playoff team, that would be something that would be mandatory, or would that be asking them to too much? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's asking a lot. You have to look at the evaluation of every organization, Charlton. You got to get the proper netting that you're going to put up. It's not just a fix going down to Home Depot, grabbing up some net and putting it around the stadium. It takes a huge task. And also fans, Charlton, all fans are not comfortable with the netting. It's imperative that the fans be attentive to what's going on in the stadium. Put down your cell phone for the length of the game. You're not going to miss anything. You might save your life, though.
Yeah, you could save your life or save someone you care about. That's all true. I want to just bring up something that's happening in the world of sports, because when you look at how everybody's tied in to what's going on in football, we haven't even had kickoff from week 1, and they're talking about 18 games or 16 games or whatever it is. But if you look at the defending U.S. Open champion, Naomi Osaka, who moved into the third round on Thursday today with a 6-2 and 6-4 victory over Magda Laneta, and setting up a possible third showdown with the great Coco Gauff, who's really becoming a rising star in the world of tennis. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that showdown is going to happen. Coco Gauff won her match this afternoon, Charlton. You're going to get these two young dominant players. Coco Gauff jumped onto the scene out at Wimbledon, Charlton, with a couple of miraculous rounds out there on the all grass court over at Wimbledon. And now she's come back home to the U.S. Open, Charlton. She's a young 15-year-old phenom that has just taken the tennis world by storm. It would be great to see her advance, Charlton, even further beyond this third round that's coming up. But, nevertheless, to get to the third round at Wimbledon and the third round at the U.S. Open at the age of 15, what a miraculous feat.
It's a miraculous feat. Now, you know how sometimes it's called the reticular activating system. When you buy a car, you tend to notice cars just like it. If you buy, a pair of shoes or a purse or whatever it is, you tend to notice it more. It doesn't mean that it wasn't always there. But we talked about artificial intelligence, how it's going to replace about 30% of the jobs in the next 15 years. Well, now, even on the great tennis tournament in New York, you can hear IBM for AI highlights, and they're telling you where to go to see the highlights. But HI, which is artificial intelligence, we just did a show on that earlier this week, Big C, and now to see it on major TV networks, I'm not saying we said it first, but it's really nice when you can do something and be in the pantheon of thought, because we did a show on it. Now I'm seeing it on TV, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you think about what tennis has done, tennis has always used the laser system and bringing back the replays where they show the tracking of the ball.
Yep.
So they've always been in the forefront of showing people what's out there AI-wise, Charlton. Tennis, because that game is so fast, you can't always see things in real time. It always amazes me with the umpires and the line officials when they get it right on these calls, and when the players challenge and they come back with the laser replay, Charlton, showing that ball was either in or out.
Yeah, and I know there time when the great Serena Williams took a lot of flack maybe for having some words with one of the judges, and I think about McEnroe. I think he had the same type of disposition, but maybe it was more acceptable coming from a male perspective. I don't know. I disagree with that, but everybody has their own thoughts on that. So again, artificial intelligence brought to you by Watson, IBM. It's amazing how it's a small universe at times, Big C. I want to bring up something that makes a lot of sense. On this date, August 29th, 1904, the U.S. holds its first Olympics in St. Louis. It was the site of the first games held on American soil, thanks to having 523 of the 630 total athletes. The U.S. won 239 medals. That's amazing. It's the largest ever at a single game. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, having the first Olympics on U.S. soil in 1904, and also the record for the largest haul ever in an Olympics, Charlton, with the U.S. taking 239 total medals during that time. But hell, they had all the athletes and everybody else was just watching. So, they had no choice but to win them all. But you think about the rich history of the Olympics and how it has grown over the decades and brought the world together, Charlton, in all different times, and how athletes look forward to it now, Charlton. And you think about the world balance when it comes to athletes. U.S. used to just dominate the Olympics all the time. But the balance of power in athletics around the world is become a great equalizer.
Yeah, it's a great equalizer, Big C, so we know that's true. And I just want to say what I love about doing our show. And again, I'm very passionate about things, and I'm not one to sit back and say, well, I don't want to talk about that because some people might be offended. People need to be offended sometimes, even ourselves. But a silent person, Dr. King said, injustice happens when good people say nothing because they're concerned with how other people feel. Or if someone's ever attacking me or somebody I love, I don't care if you want to record it. I don't care if your motive is maybe you want to have a better life with somebody. I hope that somebody will do what I did the other day. Pick up the phone, call 911. And when the arrest warrant goes out, they're a little bit different when law enforcement shows up with guns and tasers. And I really want to keep women safe, especially the ones that I love. And I hope I'm not the only guy that has that attitude, Big C. I want to say what I love about Big C Sports is you can follow it. It's a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Big C Sports brought to you by Google, brought to you by Alexa. Just say Google, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll see the show pop up on your platform on your tablet, even on television. You can say, Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast, and you'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I'll introduce Big C as the Mystic. and he'll do his thing. I want to say Big C Sports. You can also follow us on the iHeartRadio network, the #1 network in the United States of America for podcasting. You can follow us on TV with Xfinity Comcast. It's important because Big C, and you know what I'm going to say is true, at a time it was just a thought, Big C.
Well, Charlton, I mean, it's just a great thing to be involved in this every day, to come out and to be able to be vapid about what you feel and what you think in the world of sports and also the world of life.
Yeah.
You know, be able to share the thoughts. I mean, and everybody, regardless of the show that you look at or listen to, it's about opinions.
Yeah.
Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. Everybody has an opinion. It's up to the listener to decipher what they want out of anybody's message that they give you throughout the day.
Yep.
And how will it affect you.
And all we say is just Google it. Just like reading is fundamental, Googling is also fundamental. I want to get into this last segment talking about what's going to happen that you always say that people need to be prepared for. Because what is it really like to be cut in the NFL on Saturday afternoon? More than 1,000 players will lose their jobs, from players and their families to the coaches and the agents. When the Turks show up and says, bring your playbook, the coach wants to see you. It affects everybody, not just the athlete. And I think 1,000 people will lose their job on Saturday, and you know it's going to happen. It's not projected or maybe an estimate. We know it's going to happen. And you always say, and I appreciate you saying it, they can't wait until it happens. They got to be prepared before the fact. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, there's been so much talk in this past midweek about one player retiring, Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
And I praise Andrew for saying, hey, I've had enough of this game.
Yeah.
I've had enough of living for other people. I need to live for me. And when we talk about Saturday coming along, that there's going to be 1,000 players that don't want to be in that position, Charlton. There's going to be veteran players. There's going to be rookie players. They're going to be players with some experience that are cut. And there's also going to be some coaches that lose their jobs, Charlton.
Yeah.
But nobody's going to cry for him. Nobody's going to say, you know, how dare he walk away from this game. There's not going to be fans booing that player when he gets cut, like Andrew Luck got booed last week, Charlton.
Yeah.
So when you think about this, these are people who have put forth their entire life to get to that point of hopefully having longevity in the NFL, which is one of the toughest industries to get involved in. And as we look at those guys, and everybody has all these praises on draft night back in April about players being drafted and singing their praise about being the next great one, going in the first round, going in the sixth round. That dream is going to come to an end for so many players, Charlton. And when we talk about this National Suicide Hotline, how will so many of these players be affected? You know, how will it help hurt them emotionally?
Yeah.
We're going to have people going through domestic problems, Charlton.
Yeah.
Because of that. They're going to come home, and the only thing they're going to see is what's at home, and they're going to be frustrated.
Yeah.
And that person at home may be nagging, what are you going to do now? How are we going to pay the bills? We got this debt. We got that debt. That's not what these guys want to hear after just losing their dream.
Yeah.
So it's a very tough scenario. I know what it feels like when the Turk comes along. It's not an easy feeling.
Yeah.
I've seen players, go off. You talked about a coach, Frank Kush, who used to coach at Arizona State. He also coached with the Indianapolis Colts, Charlton.
Yeah.
He cut a player walks in his locker room, kicks his dog.
Yeah.
So, because he was mad at the coach.
Yeah.
Dog had nothing to do with that fight.
Yeah.
So when we think about the mental, pressure that's on these players, waiting on Saturday to roll around, Charlton, it's going to be a real tough day for a lot of men.
Well, give me your thoughts real quick, Big C, in the last few minutes. Because sometimes people think they're going to hide under the covers. They're going to, hey, I'm not showing up to work that day. But it's a reality because you've gone on. You didn't just stop life because you stopped playing football. You went in to do business. You went into broadcast. You're still doing business and broadcast. Everybody has challenges. There's no person that doesn't go through something. What would you say to players that, you've been saying it before, but sometimes people don't recognize it until it happens. Like we say, call 911 if anything is going down where someone's safety is in peril. What do you say to players that need to have a plan before they need to have a plan? Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it's really hard to explain because you get so many players now leaving college early without that college degree. that they're going out and everybody's told them you're the next great one.
You're the greatest.
So they cut their plans short because of what everybody else's dreams and aspiration was. So many players leave school saying, well, my family needs the financial help. They don't look at, if I have a degree that I can help my family for the next 20 years, they look at, I need to get a signing bonus and get drafted so I can help my family now. Whatever your family's going through, your family's still going to go through it whether you have money or not. It's only going to be a quick fix. It's not a long-term fix because if you pay one bill, then you got to keep paying bills because they're going to always come back. Well, I'm in trouble again. I need this taken care of. They don't think about what their overall needs are as athletes. We talked about it in the NBA draft when you had 233 underclassmen declare for the draft. The NBA only drafted 60 players. 42 of those players happened to be underclassmen. So they had 190 of them didn't get drafted. No one talked about that. The media never talks about that when they talk about players declaring for the draft. There's only so many draft slots. You even get it in the NFL, where you had 200 underclassmen declare for the NFL draft. But there's only 256 players get drafted. So at some point, it becomes a responsibility of the media, not only just the media. I know coaches tell players don't leave early. Pete Carroll did it years ago with Mark Sanchez, telling him he wasn't ready, that he needed another year of college, even though he had some success in the NFL. But coaches tell players that all the time. They want them at the university. They help the university out. But they also look at the long-term gain for that young man if he has that degree when he's leaving college. One of the things that the broadcast need to talk about, we talk about college football, we talk about the NFL. How many players on rosters have their degrees? That's what you need to look at.
That's a very good point. And so that's why Big C Sports will always talk about it. It's never just who won the game. You can always find other people for that. We want to bring it all to you and have you Google it. Big C, we've talked about so many things from football. We've talked about some basketball players in trouble, about men and women and their relationships, and everybody knows what they love. If somebody's not good for you, leave. Get away from it. Don't wait until someone's carrying you away. Get away now. If you're a young person, don't let bad things happen before you learn that lesson. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young men, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, what I'm looking forward to in the sports universe is that I'm going to go down and relax and watch some of these games tonight. I got some peach cobbler down there on the stove that's waiting on some of this vanilla ice cream so they can have a little relationship going on tonight. And I'm going to watch them both dissolve in my stomach.
like it's ebony, ivory living in perfect harmony. How about peach cobbler and ice cream living in perfect harmony? And you can live in harmony too every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that problem on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.